Our protagonist was an extremely powerful dragon. While trying to defend his home and the weaker beings, he ended up dying at the hands of humans due to their greed and malice. Because of this, he reincarnates, but he is a bit surprised since he has been reborn as a human and not as a dragon again. Now he must learn to walk and use this new body, trying to grow stronger and take revenge on humanity, as all of humanity was responsible for his death, and he is not happy about it at all. So I hope you enjoy this work, because this protagonist is really awesome. Guys, so I hope you leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and welcome to the video. The humanity fought against the red dragons, and in the end, he was defeated. He remarked that he had never actually entered human territory. In fact, it was the opposite. For the last 1,000 years, it had always been humans attacking him, sacrificing his flesh and blood, and in the end, he was killed. Perhaps due to his age, he did not remember many details that led to his death. But he only knew that humans hunted him in every way possible, and in the fragments of his memory, there was nothing to suggest that humans just appeared out of nowhere for no reason. He didn't recall having done anything against humanity. They killed his friends and family until no humans were left. In the end, he became the last living dragon. The dragon commented that he had nothing to call his own, and no one to lose either, since he had lost everything. Revenge was the only thing keeping him alive. And as the humans say, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But he mentioned that everything was behind him now because he could finally rest. Until he heard something strange. He wondered what that sound was. A human in front of him. The man said that he was very beautiful while holding him in his arms. He panicked, asking why there was a human holding him. He thought to himself that he had to get out of there immediately, wondering where his wings were and why he had turned into a human. Meanwhile, his father remarked that he was very cute. He thought that he liked him while he cried himself to sleep. He told that disgusting human to let him go. And he ends up remembering a voice saying that since he wanted to die so badly, he would fulfill his wish and reduce him to ashes. While he turned into a baby, his father wondered what he was doing. He simply spat in his father's face, and that was the breath of the dragon. However, it didn't work very well as his father said that was disgusting. The human, who was actually the ancient dragon, wondered what happened to his magic. His mother said to come to mommy, trying to take him, while he wondered what she was going to do with him. Until he realized that she just wanted to show him affection, calling him king. He thought that name was ridiculous and not very welcome for the breath of a dragon. He asked his mother if she had any idea who he really was, saying that in the end, the heavens allowed him, a powerful red dragon, to be reborn again, and like it or not, he now had the chance to take revenge on humanity, just as they did with the dragon race. With this human body, he would kill all humans until none remained. And his father commented that even though he was newly born, he had a mischievous face. He remarked that this baby was definitely going to be tough. But then he looked at his father, wondering why he was suddenly so sleepy. He said he was very tired and was almost falling asleep, saying that human bodies were very weak. He ended up dozing off. After some time passed, he discovered many things about humanity. He even knew the names of his parents. After all, calling them short hair and long hair didn't help much. Their names were Scarlet and Jake. They seemed to be really more beautiful than other normal humans. Scarlet's face matched her gentle personality, while the human named Jake had many muscles, and other humans did not seem as strong as his father. The nearby village always visited them and treated him with respect. A man came to visit them, saying that he saved his wife, claiming she would probably have died in the forest, and thanks to Jake, she was alive. Our protagonist remarked that it was because his parents were called adventurers by the humans themselves. His mother ended up asking if he was hungry because she was going to make something for him while he crawled. One of the guys said that her son was very smart, and children that age weren't usually that intelligent. Then one of them asked if it was because of the light, as his hair was hard and seemed a little red, while the other said that his hair started turning red a few days ago, for some unknown reason. And the protagonist felt happy with this information. It was wonderful. The red hair should be proof that he still had hidden power. Those two who had gone to visit ended up leaving, and as they were going out, they wondered if they thought that family Talon was cursed, while the other said that could be the case. Not everyone wanted to be an adventurer, and who knows the dangers they faced, right? The protagonist said that humans seemed to fear his red hair. His grand presence probably intimidated them, while his mother picked him up, saying it was time to eat, calling him little one, and he continued saying that these humans confused him the most. No matter what happened, no matter if they were angry with him, no matter what he tried, they were always smiling at him, even when he was causing trouble, while his father held him, saying that he knew he was a genius because, according to him, he already knew how to aim when he peed. The protagonist thought that if hell existed, it would definitely be like this. We are told that adventurers are rare in that world, and his mother is a mage, which is even rarer. And if he could master the most powerful magic of the future, his revenge would be much easier. He explained that at the age of 2, every child has the opportunity to go through a magical assessment. And on that special day, it was the day to discover if he had mana. While his father wished him good luck in the evaluation as he and his mother were leaving, and he explained that being the reincarnation of a red dragon and the son of a mage, he would surely pass this test. As he was going out, his father saw him leave and began to think that if he recovered his magic, no one could stop him from returning to his peak. After a while, they arrived in the city. While the protagonist was very happy, he said that what worried him the most was this weak body. They went to the central market. Some people talked about some medium-quality beast crystals while the protagonist observed. There were many people while he and his mother passed through. One of the sellers ended up kicking out a guy who was being a nuisance asking for things. The protagonist said it was a tragedy. Even though they were all humans, they despised and mocked the weaker ones. In his previous life, he had the duty to protect the weaker ones. He even worked hard on it. He protected everyone, even though he ultimately failed. The scene cuts to Holland Academy. People formed a huge line for their evaluations. The protagonist said there were so many people while some people in the back cried, saying it would be okay and that the boy would pass. One of the women ended up coming, crying, saying it was unfair because she didn't pass. The protagonist said that the child was very foolish. The world was unfair and always had been. While the man said that the next candidate was King Talon, our protagonist, the guy told him to please go forward while the protagonist said it was finally his turn. The old man told them to sit down, while his mother thanked him. The old man asked him to put his hand on the crystal so he would know if he had magical aptitude, and the crystal would also shine. The color of the shine would indicate the most compatible element with him. The protagonist raised his hands, saying that finally this moment had arrived. The powerful red dragon would make everyone's jaws drop. He ended up touching the crystal while saying that he knew all kinds of magic that existed. His mother instantly began to cry. While he didn't understand why she was crying, was she furious with his talent for magic? Was she crying with happiness that he had the same magic element as her? But then he realized, wait, the crystal wasn't shining. The old man said that unfortunately, her son did not possess magical aptitude, and the protagonist thought that was absurd, a dragon without magic. He was supposed to be the most powerful of the red dragons in his past life. While his mother asked if he was absolutely sure, as she had graduated from that academy, then her son should have magic. While the protagonist thought they must have made a mistake, that ball should have malfunctioned. The old man said he was very sorry, but he couldn't do anything, while the protagonist spat out his pacifier, saying he must be joking. Who knows, maybe he was the owner of the magic of that world. The boy went crazy. He pulled the old man's beard and started saying, I know magic. He didn't want to accept that he didn't have magical aptitude since he was a dragon. He attacked the old man in every way while he called the guards. Who would have thought that the legendary dragon wouldn't know magic after reincarnating? It was obviously absurd. According to the protagonist, it was a punishment from the heavens for having killed humans, perhaps. But then they left. He was in his mother's arms, saying what was the point of being reincarnated and still not having magic. So it didn't make any sense to him. Then later he said he understood with his eyes shining. The heavens were testing him. It had to be. If he couldn't be a mage, he needed to find another way to take his revenge. After some time, he and his parents were eating, and he called his father, asking him to teach him to fight. He wanted to learn swordsmanship, and his father felt very proud. The protagonist said that was it. He might not have learned magic, but he could still be a swordsman. His dream of revenge would be realized in any way. But it was obvious he knew revenge wouldn't be as easy as he thought. While his father said he would advance on him. It had been 2 years since he had been testing and training swordsmanship with his father, and still, he hadn't won even once. But that would change that day because he was confident. His father charged while he said he still knew this movement. He just needed to seize the opportunity to attack at the exact moment he attacked, and so he could attack from the side. His father charged, jumping, and he said that as he thought he would manage to win. But he ended up tripping and took a hit from his father. He wondered why it always ended up like this. That clumsy body couldn't even keep up with his brain. Those awkward limbs just hindered him. After a while, he was in bed, and his mother said it was great that he had woken up, and she ended up arguing with his father because he was laughing, saying that he couldn't control himself, and he was only 4 years old. But his father argued that there was only 1 year left until the night test, and if it continued like this, he wouldn't pass at all. His mother got a little furious. saying that he was pushing him too hard and that he didn't need to follow in his footsteps. There were many other great jobs besides being an adventurer, but his father spoke with a smile that he wasn't pushing. He seemed clumsy, but it was just because he was very young. He still didn't control his body well and still had a year for them to train. He had to believe he would make it into the Night Academy. The protagonist said he only had a year to enter the academy. Would he really make it? He wasn't very confident, but he told his parents not to worry because he would succeed. Besides, he thought he was the reincarnation of a dragon, so he wasn't just an ordinary human. He said he could definitely do it. He would be the strongest person anywhere in the world. Still, he was much more capable than any human his age. He just needed a little more control. He wondered why the human body was so awkward. He had 4 limbs, but they needed to move separately. It didn't even make sense in his mind. His father ended up arriving, saying that he knew he would be there. He was surprised by his father, who ended up giving him a sword as a gift. He said that this sword was his from that moment on, and he was already old enough to train with a real sword. The protagonist was very surprised, asking if the sword was really his, while his father said it would help him improve his control much faster. And then he leaned into the protagonist's ear, saying that he had another gift for him, while he wondered what it would be. Then they went to the barn, and his father said it was a magical training dummy. The protagonist was surprised by this, while his father said to take it seriously, as this dummy had movements controlled by magic. And this was what the students of the Night Academy used to train apprentices. The protagonist wondered if he was sure because he really didn't believe it was just a dummy, and then his father warned him to attack. So the protagonist prepared. He charged. Level 1 was activated. A system window appeared. The dummy defended against the protagonist's attack, and he was surprised by that, while his wooden sword was thrown away because of the dummy. The system warned that level 1 was deactivated, and the protagonist was very surprised while his father said that wasn't too bad. If he could defeat the level 1 dummy, he guaranteed that he would pass the exam. He even had to pull a lot of strings to get one of these, and he was totally enchanted because now he would improve in an instant. Some time passed, and the protagonist was training. He said that his movements still couldn't keep up with his thoughts, and that human body was very weak. If this continued, he wouldn't be able to defeat that dummy, much less take revenge on humanity. But someone ended up overhearing him say this and asked how he could defeat a dummy. Why did he want to defeat a dummy? The protagonist prepared, asking who was there, but he realized it was just a girl. She asked if he was okay and didn't mean to scare him. She introduced herself as Amy, saying she lived in the village. She mentioned that she had seen him alone, even though it was very late. So she decided to come by to see what was happening. The protagonist felt a bit embarrassed, saying that he got scared a little, and he asked if this place was dangerous. She said it was safe during the day, but it was very close to the forest, and demonic beasts could roam there when it got dark. The protagonist talked about the demonic beasts, saying that she knew quite a bit, but she said not so much. She only knew a few places because she harvested fruits and some other ingredients. She also said it was going to get dark soon, so they had to go down the mountain, asking him to go with her. He said that was fine, and when he was about to say his name, she already knew, saying it was Ray and asking if she was right, as he was already well known in the village. Then the protagonist remembered. It was obvious he was known. His mother and father were adventurers. Besides that, everyone talked about his red hair. No human had ever had red hair in that city before, so he became the strange one. They respected his parents, but they were terrified of him. Perhaps it was because the adults always told scary stories about malevolent red dragons to frighten the children. So red is a color that symbolizes strength and evil in human society. How ironic, right? It was the greedy humans themselves who destroyed his race, but they were portrayed as the villains in the story, and he only retaliated against them for defending himself. But humans saw this as proof of their supposed brutality, even when it wasn't. And the girl asked what the king was doing. They should go down soon, while he said he was going. They started going together. She commented that she always saw him training and asked what he was doing. The protagonist said he wanted to be a swordsman since he didn't have magic. She thought that was amazing and said his father was the only swordsman in the village. Some time passed, and some people ended up arriving, catching the attention of the two. There were 3 boys. One told her to stay away from his little sister, calling him Firehair, but the girl defended Ray, telling her brother that he hadn't done anything wrong. But her brother didn't like that at all and asked why she was hanging out with that redhead. He wanted to know if she had never heard of his curse, which was contagious. The protagonist just stood still while the 2 boys approached him. One of them said that his parents must be crazy, saying they were raising a damned child like him, and the other said they should have just messed with the wrong people to receive a curse like that. They ended up passing by him while he clenched his fists, and his veins pulsed. He called them out, and a punch appeared. An extremely strong punch was thrown by one of them, and the blonde boy was surprised and a little scared. He ended up pushed back. The protagonist told him to get out of his way because he was going to beat up whoever spoke ill of his parents. That guy told him that he knew about his two parents, who were adventurers, and that his father was a swordsman. That's why he knew he had trained a lot, right? And if he wanted to fight, he was up for that challenge. One of them ended up grabbing the sword, and the blonde said he didn't want to use weapons, so he didn't want to kill him. His sister even tried to stop him, while the protagonist said that was great because he wouldn't use one either. He prepared for the fight, saying they could all come at him at once because he didn't even care. They both started to fight while the other two boys cheered for the blonde. In the end, the protagonist ended up taking a beating and asked if he was admitting defeat. The blonde said he was still weak while the protagonist tried to get up. He said it was disappointing. If he had his father's help training and still wasn't anything, he was a total failure since his father was just a normal merchant, and he commented that he should give up on being a swordsman while the protagonist was on the ground, and many things appeared in his mind. Those remarks from people telling him to find something he could do right without fighting. The scene changes, and the girl ends up fighting with her brother, saying he had gone too far. But he said it was that brat's fault and asked his sister to stay far away from that guy from that day on. According to him, he didn't want her to get the curse of red hair, while she screamed that she hated him. And after slapping his head, she left very angry about the situation, and the boy ended up looking at his armor, which was totally deformed because of that punch. He wondered if that was really that guy's punch. His arm would have broken from that first hit, and he would have won the fight instantly. The scene cuts, and the protagonist had arrived home. His mother was radiant as always, saying he had arrived and took a while. She noticed that he had some injuries and asked if he had fought, but he said no, it was just his training. His mother told him not to lie to her, saying those boys had provoked him again, but he denied it, saying he was a man, so there was no problem. His father said that was it. Ray was a man, and it was clear how hard he was working on his training, but his mother didn't like that at all. After a while, it was already nighttime, and the protagonist said he was going to train a little more. Soon they started to battle, and the protagonist thought he had already learned the patterns of the techniques and movements of the dummy. Therefore, he charged with the sword in hand, saying he just had to find a flaw in its defense, but in the end, he ended up hitting a wooden beam. He missed his target, and for that, he was severely punished by that dummy. The next day, the protagonist was going to train again, but then he noticed that girl was there again. She looked a bit down when she saw him, but suddenly she said good morning to him, calling out to him. The protagonist asked her if she had been waiting for him, and she said she just wanted to apologize to him. But the protagonist said she didn't need to, as it wasn't her fault, but she argued it was because of her brother. But the protagonist just said he wasn't good enough, and the girl became a little sad and began to cry. The protagonist remarked that humans really were a lot of work, and he said all right then, he would accept her apology. He began to think that he thought he would have to follow the so-called social norms of humans. He started to eat one of the apples and said he had already accepted her apology, so she didn't need to cry. She ended up thanking him and asked him not to worry because Gary wouldn't bother them anymore. After that day, Amy was always in the same place every day waiting for the protagonist to arrive. Sometimes she would even chatter all day in his ear, while on other occasions she would sit quietly reading a book. Soon after, he got used to having her by his side. The scene cuts to the Talon family's residence. The protagonist's father was furious, asking how the nearby villages had also been attacked by those creatures. The man who was sitting said yes, and there had been no identified witnesses, but they had already had infected victims. And the man said that everyone was still too disoriented to say what had really happened, and that's why they wanted his help. The protagonist's mother said those creatures didn't appear near human settlements, and that was very strange, so she would go with her husband. But he told her not to worry, it was just a reconnaissance mission. Besides, Ray needed to take the test soon, so he needed her to stay to take care of him. He told her not to worry, as he would return as quickly as possible. She said she understood and just asked him to be careful. The scene cuts, and the protagonist thought to himself that he still didn't have enough coordination with that body. He looked back and saw that girl quietly reading her book. He blushed a bit at seeing that, but then he snapped back to reality, telling himself to get a grip. He ended up calling her, saying they would stop for today and head home. The girl said she hadn't noticed since time had passed so quickly. The protagonist asked her if she wasn't afraid of people treating her badly, but she replied that what others thought of her was their problem. She had her own opinions and didn't believe in those ridiculous legends. So what if he was a redhead? It was just a color, and they shouldn't torture or treat him badly because of it. She called his name and said she hoped he didn't care about other people's opinions either, as he had to pave his own way. And then he remembered his own path. While recalling her brother telling him to do something at his level, he wondered why he hadn't thought of that. He ended up thanking her by touching her shoulder, and he left feeling excited, saying they would see each other the next day. After nightfall, he was already with the dummy. He placed the sword in his hand and said he was going to do what he was good at. He would return to being who he was. He ended up saying level 1 activate, activating the dummy, and he began to circle around it. He said he became much more agile when using all of his limbs, just as he had been as a dragon. He declared that at that moment he would jump up, and he landed a blow on that creature while he exclaimed that level 1 was completed, and he became very happy that it had worked. According to him, his father said he would pass the academy if he defeated one of those knights, and now he just had to test his limits. So he said level 2 activate. The next morning, his father was already preparing to leave, while the protagonist said the sun had barely risen and he was already going out. His father apologized, saying he had received a mission and he wouldn't return home for a while. But he didn't need to worry as he guaranteed he would return in time to see his exam. With a smile on his face, he told the protagonist to train hard against the training dummy while he was away, as he was sure he would be able to defeat it. But then the protagonist said that in fact, he had already defeated it, only to be interrupted. The protagonist stated he was ready and heading out, asking the protagonist to take good care of his mother, and she would take good care of him. The protagonist said it was fine. Passing the test against a training dummy wasn't anything special, and when he returned, he would leave his father very surprised by his strength. In the meantime, he thought about how excited his father would be. His reaction would be funny. If it weren't for Amy's hint, he wouldn't have discovered that way. And he, a bit thoughtful, said that now he knew how to feel anxious. It was like feeling gratitude for a person. He was becoming more emotionally human. Humans could be irritating, but these three were different. He wouldn't take revenge on them, obviously. After some time, the protagonist went to train, but he noticed that the girl hadn't come by that day. But then he stopped and thought, since when do I need to be happy for her? He said it was nothing special. There was no need to be happy for her. On the contrary, no one was going to disturb his training. He shouldn't let himself be corrupted by human emotions because he was the great red dragon. After a while, he was tired of training, and he realized it was already very late. If he didn't go home at that moment, he would hear his mother scolding, and he still hadn't thanked Amy, but he thought she was busy that day. He would talk to her later. As he was returning home, he saw many people gathered, asking if they had found anything. They were checking in the west. A desperate blonde man asked if anyone had seen his son. That was Amy and Gary's father. A truth teller said he had seen them, and they were in a group of 4. They had gone to his shop earlier to buy some weapons, and he heard the blonde boy say that the others were going into the forest or something like that. They wanted to hunt demonic beasts. Amy's father and mother were desperate, while others asked if he had let them go, as they were just kids, and they were already blaming the old man. But the old man said it wasn't his fault and asked her to calm down. Gary's father said the forest was very dangerous and they needed to inform the guards right away because they should look for the 4 kids. The protagonist realized that Amy and her brother, along with the group, had disappeared, and karma hit fast. He was reaping what he had sown, and he said that if a demonic beast killed them, it was just saved work, since he would have to kill them anyway. But there was a problem. Amy had also disappeared. Amy treated him very well, and he didn't intend to take revenge on her. But it was a pity she had been born with such an idiotic brother. He remarked that humans always had very short lives. They die young or old, it was all the same. But then, while he was walking, he remembered her. Her voice echoed in his head, telling him he had to pave his own way. He stopped walking and wondered what was squeezing his chest. He said no. Amy was innocent, and he would save her. He hadn't even told her that he had defeated the training dummy with the hint she had given. He started shouting for Amy to wait for him, as he would save her. After a while, there were some wolves on the ground and some injured people. His sister was desperate while Gary tried to save her. A gigantic monster stood in front of them, a 3-eyed werewolf, and the protagonist was running from the other side to try to save them. He said he could smell blood and wondered if Amy was in danger. He commented that luckily it was just a teenage demonic wolf. He had a cut in his belly caused by a knife, and his body was still warm, meaning they were nearby. But the footprints and tracks were very messy, and he wondered which way they had gone. But then he heard a scream and said it was Amy. Her brother was practically defeated while she tried to wake him up. but the wolf showed no mercy and charged at them. She covered her face, calling for someone to save her, and who appeared was the protagonist. He plunged his sword into the creature's mouth. He asked Amy if she was okay. She said yes, but Gary and the others were hurt and asked him to be careful. The protagonist ended up getting injured in the arm and thrown away, but he didn't stop there. He told her not to worry because he wasn't going to die just from that. He begins to park her through the trees, saying he had to draw that wolf away from Amy. The wolf tries to hit him in every way possible while he holds his sword in his mouth. He remarked that this was bad. That human body was very weak, and there was no other way for him to face that adult demonic wolf on equal terms. Facing the overwhelming strength, his speed was extremely low, and he wouldn't be able to dodge it. He recalled that in the past, demonic wolves were nothing to him, but now they were a very strong opponent. The protagonist shouted that those humans were his, and he wouldn't let it touch one of them. The wolf lunged at him as he prepared, but he knew he wouldn't be able to withstand much more if that attack landed. He was betting everything on this. In the end, he was wounded and thrown away. He began to think that his attack was too weak, and he only managed to rip out one eye. If this had happened in the past, a single blow would have been enough to drive his claws into its brain. But with this body, he had to use human weapons. The wolf charged again, and the protagonist dodged, cutting one of its legs, saying its defense had a flaw. The wolf fell to the ground, and he felt a bit happy about that, but then the wolf hit him again, sending him flying through the air. He managed to control his fall and called out to the wolf to control itself, referring to it as Pugento. While advancing again with the sword in his mouth, the wolf tried to attack him again, but the protagonist ended up cutting it to pieces. He said he had finally gotten rid of that wolf while Amy was injured. Just as he was about to lose consciousness, a creature appeared. It was a fire creature, and the protagonist wondered what that was. Soon, a system window appeared, showing rewards obtained, skills unlocked, and he had gained draconic eyes. He had also obtained an intermediate demon core. A question appeared asking if he wanted to absorb it, with yes and no options, but the protagonist still didn't understand what was happening. He just kept saying that his priority was to save the two of them since the smell of blood would attract more demonic beasts. He ended up carrying the boy on his back and told him to stop moving, and then he picked up the girl too. He knew he was at his limit carrying both of them, so he needed to find a safe place quickly. He noticed there were two more injured men, but there wasn't much he could do. He had done all he could and felt sorry, but those two who would be left behind were in the hands of fate. After a while, some villagers were looking for them until they spotted a boy carrying both of them. The old man asked them to inform the parents quickly, while another asked if that was the red-haired boy from the Talon family. The protagonist ended up collapsing, asking them to help since they needed treatment, while one was holding the girl in his arms. A woman ended up asking if her children were there. She wanted to know where Bob and Kyle were, but the man said he was sorry. That boy had only brought those two. The mother became desperate and soon started somewhat of a fight. She began to run, calling everyone cowards, saying she would look for her sons alone, while asking if Bob and Kyle were there. But soon, several monsters appeared behind her, and she started running away. She shouted to everyone that she hadn't returned because she was scared and asked where that boy was. She grabbed the protagonist by the jacket and asked where her son was, as she claimed the two were well behaved and had never gone into the forest. She demanded he spill the truth and ended up slapping him across the face. There, he realized how miserable humans were. They were practically blaming him, while she was hitting him multiple times in the face. The protagonist ended up smiling and said what he had already said. They were in the forest. The mother became frantic, calling him a cold-blooded monster, asking how he could let them enter the forest while the protagonist asked if he had any beard. She ended up letting him go, saying he was unforgivable. The protagonist began to think that they had focused so much on his red hair that they forgot he was just a human. They didn't even consider him a child, just a monster in their eyes. The woman grabbed a torch, calling the guys fools. The protagonist knew at that moment that humans were more frightening than all the beasts or creatures that existed in the forest, while the woman said she would never forgive him. She raised those torches while the protagonist said that the real monsters were right in front of her. He wondered if he would die again since he no longer had the strength to fight. As the woman told him to die, the protagonist, with a smile on his face, said that even for a stick with fire, it was a terrible life. But then the boy appeared, Gary, and everyone wondered why he was doing that. According to them, the red-haired boy was a monster who had bewitched everyone. But then Gary didn't have patience. He said that was ridiculous. They were all crazy. How could they decide the death of a person based on speculation? That's why he told them to not dare touch his savior. Right after that, the protagonist heard the woman scream that it was all his fault, asking why he didn't just die. He saw everyone charging at him wanting to kill him, saying to kill that evil dragon. The protagonist finally woke from his nightmare, and his mother was by his bedside waiting for him to wake up, since he had been gravely injured. He saw that she was worried and crying, even sleeping. He wondered how human hearts could be so beautiful, but also how they could be so cruel. He grabbed his mother's arm, and she felt very relieved to see him waking up. She said she wasn't dreaming. She gave him a tight hug, saying she thought he would never wake up. His mother said she hoped he had learned his lesson and would never be so reckless again. The protagonist asked how long he had slept. Well, she said it had been a whole week, and she wouldn't know what to say to his father if he hadn't woken up. The protagonist asked how those people were. His mother said the two children he saved only had minor injuries, but Bob and Kyle had not been found yet. She thought they should already be dead. She explained that she arrived at the scene when Gary was defending the protagonist. And obviously, his mother was very furious, asking who had done that. Everyone started trying to explain to her that her son was the one who made the others enter the forest, and so he was partially responsible. They said that since she was his mother, she should try to understand the concern since her son had disappeared along with them. She ended up hugging her son and was furious. While the woman was scared, that woman, that monster, began to cry, saying her children had gone into the forest and hadn't returned. The protagonist's mother knew everyone was pretending. As she left, some people said they should have stayed away from that, and it was all because of the curse, while another said he was speaking too loudly, but he didn't care. In the end, the protagonist's mother said it was all right because everything was over, and it wasn't his fault. That boy Gary told everything, and she said the king was amazing. She started to leave, saying he must be hungry, and that she would make something for him to eat. The protagonist let out a long sigh and said he had noticed something before, that window. He wondered if everyone had that. He clicked on the draconic eyes and managed to get a different eye. He could see through the wall, and a system alert appeared, indicating low resistance and that it was crucial to rest. The protagonist said it was obvious. That was his previous ability when he was a great red dragon. He knew countless spells, and after failing the test to enter the Magic Academy, he would never be able to use it again. But he had regained that ability, although it seemed he still had to acquire his skills one by one again. He also saw that he had another thing, the basic demon beast crystal. He earned that after killing that intermediate wolf, but then he wondered. Everyone started screaming that there was a fire nearby. The protagonist's mother arrived, saying there was a fire and they had to leave. She started trying to control the fire with her water magic, but then the protagonist looked and realized that all this was the villagers' fault. That woman had probably started the fire. He said she was 100% guilty. That was Bob and Kyle's mother. The villagers began to comment that this was definitely the Talon house. The protagonist's mother tried even to put out the fire, but the flames were too strong. She used a spell called Dispel, and afterward, she said she had at least managed to relieve it a little. Meanwhile, the people at the back, from the rear, said those people were cursed. That family already was. His mother looked at him excitedly, asking Ray if he had been scared, but she noticed he was very quiet. He said he was fine, and that his mother was the best since all that fire had vanished. Well, she said it was clear she had learned the magic to save people and for emergencies like this, and that's why the protagonist felt a bit sad. He said humans wanted to burn their house down. They might even want them to die in the fire. In other words, they wanted to kill them, and that's why he would take revenge. After a while, the protagonist said he was going to train, while his mother said his wounds hadn't healed yet, so he didn't have to overexert himself. After some time, the protagonist went to the bridge in front of the forest. He began to use his draconic eyes, and because of that, he saw that all the nearby demon beasts were indeed lower level. He noticed a demon beast of the monkey type. He picked a fruit, and the protagonist prepared himself. He ended up launching a surprise attack, managing to finish off the creature as it fell to the ground. After some time, he had defeated 20 of them. It must be said that was enough. Then a window appeared. You obtained a basic demon beast crystal, asking if he would like to absorb it. The protagonist realized he had obtained another, and he began to think. It seemed those things appeared by chance. He had killed 20 low-level demonic beasts, but had only gotten 2 crystals. He wondered what the effect of absorbing them would be. Then he looked back and noticed something strange. A creature was very sad because its parents had died, and the protagonist felt a bit touched by that. He told that little guy that it seemed from now on he would also have to fight alone. But then a system window appeared in front of the protagonist, offering the opportunity to tame a black demon wolf pup, asking if he would like to feed and tame it. The protagonist was very surprised by this window, and it was obvious he said yes. It didn't make sense to leave that creature alone. Besides, he wanted to test it. One of those magical stones appeared, and the wolf began to float. The protagonist said he had finally done it. The black demon wolf pup was successfully tamed, but then something hit the protagonist on the forehead, a purple energy. He said it entered his body after being tamed, and obviously, that was a bit strange. He asked the system if that wouldn't have any side effects. He also asked if he could summon it whenever he wanted, because if that didn't work, he would kill that creature. A system alert appeared, saying he obtained a reward. Unlocks the ability 2 out of 1,000, and the second ability was beast taming. The protagonist said that was good. He had gained another ability, but from that moment on, he had to study this. He had to finish the most important things first. He activated his draconic eye and said they should be around there. He ended up visualizing the targets, and a locked target appeared. The protagonist said he had found them. After some time, he arrived at the location, but what was left were only a few bones and the rest. The protagonist began to wrap everything up and put it in the bucket, and then he started to exit that cave. Later, his mother told him to take care of his wounds since he wasn't 100% recovered yet, while he said he understood. Then she asked if he had entered the phase of answering back and so on, especially since he had returned with dirty clothes. But he said that in the morning he would train more, so he would sleep. His mother said she really didn't know what to do with him, and if his father were there, he might even train with them. The protagonist felt happy with that news that his father would return. He said that was wonderful, and he could hardly wait to train with him and show his results. But then his mother became furious, telling him to cover up properly and not mess up the bed. He said yes, ma'am. He understood. He commented that the pressure was unbearable. Only his mother could impose that. After a while, he began to sleep, only to wake up. He went straight to the barn and found a bag of blood there. After some time, he went to Bob and Kyle's house, and the mother of the dead boys woke up and asked who could be making all that noise in the early morning. But then she wondered if it was Bob and Kyle. She ran calling out the names of both, asking if they had returned, but all she saw was a shirt on the floor. He said that was definitely Kyle's shirt, but then she also saw a footprint on the ground. She ran straight into the forest, saying she would definitely save them. Deep within the forest, she said it was very dark there, and she shouldn't have gone so far in. But then she heard a noise and became very scared. She realized it was another piece of clothing. It was Bob's. The protector was ready with a trap bucket, while she told them to stop fooling around and come home. When she was at the exact location, the protagonist let go of that rope, and all the blood fell on her. She became desperate, asking who had done that. Then she realized who it was, and it was the protagonist who fell in front of her. She knew and said she never doubted him. He was the monster who made that happen, and she demanded he return her children. But behind the protagonist were many monsters, and his mother began to become very afraid. Only a scream could be heard from the forest. After a while, it was already dawn, and the villagers asked if anyone had heard the gossip. But then the protagonist stopped, and they started to stop gossiping about the Talon family. The protagonist was already there, losing patience, while one of the guys said it was a great day, greeting the protagonist with a good morning. While another said he was training again, he was training hard every day. While the protagonist said it seemed there was more gossip spreading about him, but he didn't care. He had liked this. After some time, there were many horses, and the protagonist approached. That was the news. His father had returned. But upon entering the house, he faced a very tense scene. He wondered what had happened to his father and ran. His father was sick and gravely injured. His mother was crying, saying it was a miracle he was alive, and she was sure he would be okay. The protagonist ended up using his draconic eye and said that was strange. He had never seen anyone in that state, not even when he was the great red dragon. But he ended up hearing about the shadow killing everyone. His father only spoke of this shadow. One of the warriors said he was very sorry, and he had been cursed by the shadows. He was attacked by a dark beast at the border while defending a villager. The protagonist wondered what kind of shadow curse that was. He had never heard of that, not even in his previous life. He questioned when that could have happened and why, while one of the villagers said she shouldn't be kind because, either way, they hadn't managed to protect her husband. But she thanked her nonetheless. The protagonist was looking at a system window, saying that maybe that spell would serve for something. It was one of the high circle magics he used to employ to dispel all black magic and curses. But he didn't know how to unlock it because if he had to keep killing demonic beasts to get rewards, that would take a long time, and he would certainly have to kill one of a much higher level. However, he was still very weak and didn't have that option. He asked his mother if he would have to keep killing the strong ones if he entered the Avirian Academy. His mother didn't answer anything, and she said it was clear he would, as that was where his father studied, and he would become as strong as his father. And that's why the protagonist thumped his chest, saying then he would enter that academy and find a way to heal his father. His mother became very emotional, hugging him, saying he would certainly succeed, and that's why she believed in him. After a while, there was a very dark room where the men said the prophecy had been revealed. The world would soon undergo great changes. That red-haired boy, they wondered what exactly he would bring to this world. Would he bring redemption, or would he bring disaster? There was no way to know, but one of the old men said to inform the night halls. They needed to find him as soon as possible, while another said he understood. One of them said that if it was redemption, they would guide him. Otherwise, they would have to destroy him. The scene cuts, and there were many people standing in the places. They all said they had arrived. There were many horses and many people, even a handsome blonde guy. He called himself Sir Delbert. They said he looked exactly like they had described. The girls went crazy upon seeing that guy, and in the end, they went to a specific location, while many people just watched. One person began to say to the ladies and gentlemen who were there to welcome their arrival. He was the Knight Winford, the Knight of the Averian Academy, and to his right was Sir Delbert. To his left was Silbernado, who needs no introduction. They said that on that day they would be the exam inspectors, which was open for all children aged 5 and older to participate. Therefore, he wanted everyone to show what they were capable of. He presented the combat dummy that was ready. He said that at that moment the candidates would go one by one, and the exam would begin then. One boy was already prepared for battle. In his thoughts, it was just a wooden dummy that he would split in half with his strength. He prepared with the wooden sword and let out a war cry while his parents cheered for their son from the stage. But in the end, the challenge had ended, and the elapsed time was 1 second, and he had already lost. The dwarf told the next candidate to present himself, while the protagonist stood in the background, saying that, as his father had said, he had to defeat the level 1 dummy. Besides that, he didn't move, but his speed of defense and counterattack was at an adult level until he saw someone whispering from behind. Some people were asking if he had seen it. It was a waste of time to go to that town, but unfortunately, they had to obey the elder's orders. The protagonist thought that he could hear that conversation from that distance, and it seemed that after obtaining more beast crystals, his senses had become much sharper. The blonde boy said that the knight should go to the noble cradle, and he didn't understand why they were wasting time with those filthy peasants, while another said he was being a bit harsh, but he still wouldn't deny it. A sword fell to the ground, and they said he had been approved. This was the boy the protagonist had saved, and when he saw the protagonist in the crowd, he gave a thumbs up, all happy for having passed. The protagonist felt awkward, wondering what he was doing, but then those two noticed that red-haired boy. They said he was a cursed brat, commenting that his hair was made of blood, and everyone became very afraid. The dwarf told the next candidate to prepare, as the test would begin in a minute. He then asked Delbert, who was behind him, what had happened. Delbert said he didn't believe in prophecies, but if it was true, then the redhead would pass the test. He ended up whispering to the dummy to activate level 3 because he wouldn't let that boy pass. The dummy charged with full speed while the old man shouted for them to be careful, but the protagonist wasn't intimidated at all, while the dummy jumped at him, and someone yelled for him to dodge that, saying it was too dangerous. But in the end, everyone was surprised, and even the crowd didn't understand anything. The protagonist had simply decapitated that wooden dummy. The dwarf was speechless, while the other told them to announce the results. The dwarf congratulated the boy, saying he had passed the test. The protagonist headed toward his mother, all happy for having passed. Meanwhile, his friend was also very excited to see how strong the protagonist was. After some time, the protagonist told his father that he was already heading out since he had passed the test, and would therefore leave for the village with the knights. But his father was still in the same state, repeatedly saying the same words, shadows. The protagonist thought he wasn't listening to him at that moment, but he swore he would find a way to heal him. But he was still a bit sad about the situation. His mother told Ray to take that, and the protagonist wondered what that would be. She presented a necklace and said it was an heirloom of their family. She hoped it would bring him a lot of luck. He thanked her and said he would be going, so they had to take care of themselves. His mother told him to take care and to remember that she would always be there to help him. But the protagonist said not to worry because he was already a grown man. His mother watched him leave slowly. She was emotional, and on the other side, the knights were already ready to go. The guy was already very surprised by the protagonist's strength, saying he could go in there since the other boy had already entered. The protagonist thought that this other boy must be his friend. He said they had been approved, and that's why they would travel in the same carriage. After a while, it was already dark. and they were passing by. The blonde boy ended up apologizing, saying that he had hit the protagonist and said many bad things in the past, and that's why he was apologizing for being an idiot. But the protagonist said it was alright since he was only 5 years old and he had already saved the protagonist, so they were theoretically even. But then the boy said the protagonist spoke as if he weren't 5 years old as well. But the protagonist didn't respond and asked how Amy was doing since he mentioned she hadn't come to say goodbye. But then he asked if the protagonist wasn't surprised to know she would be going to the Roland Magic Academy. And the protagonist wondered and became surprised. Amy had never told him that she had an aptitude for magic. The soldiers were outside until someone yelled for them to stop. The two ended up peering through the cloth that was on the carriage, and the blonde boy said the mist was very thick and wanted to know what had happened. The warrior wondered who was coming since they were the knights from the Avalon Knight Academy, and he asked everyone to introduce themselves. Only a figure appeared in the middle of the mist. It was a girl archer, apparently very injured, asking for help. She introduced herself as Woody Work, and she was an adventurer from the Traceless Guild. The dwarf asked her what had happened, and she explained that her group had been attacked by dark beasts. The dwarf wondered what she meant and why they had appeared there. They hadn't found a single magical beast on the way. The blonde boy behind said they must have avoided them upon sensing they were strong. The leader of the group said they were heading to Randy, and if they wanted, they could follow them. She thanked them, saying that City would help. But then the protagonist wondered what he meant by Randy. Weren't they heading to the Knight Academy? Then the blonde man said he shouldn't be talking nonsense, asking what good it would do to send a handful of kids to the front lines. Another explained that yes, the Avarian Knight Academy was on the border, so it could be attacked at any moment. And that's why they would train in Randy for at least a decade until they got the hang of the combat fundamentals. And before continuing their studies at the Avarian Academy, the protagonist wondered what he meant by 10 years. For a dragon, that was nothing, but for a human, it was way too long, and his father probably wouldn't survive that long. And so he became a bit more anxious. The journey continued, and the boy began to think that that huntress was the only survivor. And Ray's father had also been attacked by dark beasts. At least he thought so, until the knights were shocked to hear about them. He wondered what would happen if they encountered them. The protagonist realized something was wrong. The leader of the group called for the men to prepare for battle because something big was approaching. It was several bears, but they were infused with purple energy, probably shadow monsters. The warriors were a bit scared, as it was a kingly bear, and on top of that, it had turned into a shadow beast, meaning it was much more dangerous. The bears began to attack everyone while they prepared for combat. The dwarf was distracted when one appeared behind him. He even tried to sneak attack, and the dwarf realized he wouldn't be able to dodge in time. But our protagonist appeared on the scene and finished off the monster. The dwarf said that was very good, and they should prepare for battle, while the protagonist said he understood and could handle it. As they were fighting against the small bears, that blonde boy wondered why the big one hadn't moved. But then the leader said it was probably waiting for something. The blonde boy continued to fight one of the large bears. He ended up being slightly injured by a scratch on his back, but the protagonist took the opportunity and delivered a slash to the bears' backs. He told the boy to be careful because those bears were much stronger than those demonic wolves. The boy agreed that they really were. One of the bears began to let out a roar that also unleashed some powers, pushing everyone back. The blonde boy even wondered what kind of power that was. The protagonist didn't know either and said that beast was too strong. The injured bear, bleeding from the mouth, pointed at the bear with its finger, while the leader said he was just standing there without attacking, and the dwarf wondered what those things wanted. One of the bears began to speak. "You will never defeat the shadows. The shadows will take over the entire continent." Everyone became frightened as a monster was speaking in front of them, and it continued to say that they were doomed to fail, and those around them were also doomed to death. The protagonist was a bit surprised by that, and the blonde boy asked what kind of joke or trick that was, while the dwarf said that was supposed to be a threat. The bear simply jumped very high and ended up leaving the area. The blonde adventurer wondered if it had left, while the dwarf answered that he thought so. The leader said they should at least be thankful it didn't want to fight, or else they would come out very injured. A system window appeared, saying he obtained a low-level beast crystal, asking if the protagonist would like to absorb it. The protagonist wondered why that seemed to be speaking to him, and not directly to the adventurers. The leader of the group praised Ray and Garrick for handling the situation exceptionally well, expressing his confidence that they would become great knights in the future. The blonde boy thanked him for the compliment, visibly pleased. Curiously, the protagonist inquired if beasts, like the bear they had encountered, usually spoke. The leader replied with a firm no. clarifying that such occurrences were not typical. Shadow beasts almost never appear within the territory, and it was also the first time he encountered one that spoke. At that moment, he wondered how the protagonist could remain calm in that situation. Someone his age should be freaking out in fear at that moment. And from the back, the blonde man was watching the situation. He ended up making noise with his mouth because he was very nervous. The scene cuts to the city of Rennie. They had finally arrived. There were many people waiting for their arrival. They even commented that there seemed to be more guards than usual. One of the guards welcomed the knight. While he wondered why there were so many guards on duty, the guy explained that the kingdom of Alluri had issued an alert to Ambar, and all cities and villages were on high alert. In the background, that girl who had been saved thanked them for helping her arrive at the location. The knight said he understood, and he wondered what he meant by an Ambar alert. Things had gotten that serious? It seemed the continent was on the brink of a crisis. He wondered if it was because of that boy from the prophecy who would save them all. Meanwhile, the protagonist was talking to his friend. The blonde boy asked if the protagonist had seen that thing. The protagonist looked up and imagined his father. He said he would become a knight and guaranteed that. Things had barely started. He told his father to hold on and wait for him because he would definitely save him. The scene cuts, and 10 long years pass. They were in a room when someone raised a hand, and the teacher explained that despite most knights being unable to use magic, they mastered another skill and asked if anyone could say what it was. Gary explained that of course it was Kai. He continued saying that by developing Kai, they could enhance their own bodies and senses, and some practitioners could even surpass the limits of the human body for a time. The teacher said that was a very good answer, and it seemed he was prepared. She asked if anyone could say why Kai could only be trained at 15 years of age, and asked if Ray could respond too. Gary, realizing that our protagonist was no longer by his side, wondered where he could have gone. He explained to the teacher that he was feeling pressed, and that's why he had gone to the bathroom, while she let out a sigh and said she understood, asking Sylvia if she could answer. Sylvia, a beautiful girl with silver hair, said that training Kai puts a lot of pressure on the human body, and the internal organs stop developing at 15 years old. So training after that age minimizes the damage the body suffers. The teacher said that was an excellent answer from Sylvia. She continued explaining that they would all take their first steps on their journeys, and she hoped they would remember everything they learned at that school and use the information in their careers. On the other side was the protagonist with his wolf. The wolf had already grown quite large. While he told Noir, the name of the wolf, to attack that giant boar, the wolf opened his jaws and charged forward. He unleashed some long-range attacks, slicing the giant boar, and in the end, he managed to defeat it. The protagonist looked at the system window, noting that he had acquired the low-level beast crystal, and the system asked if he would like to absorb it. Then a window appeared saying that he had completely absorbed the low-level beast crystal. The protagonist began to pet his wolf, saying he did a great job. He then said that would be enough for that day. As if he took too long to return, someone would freak out. When he was returning to the path, several knights were behind him. One of them said it was a surprise to see him there. He was thinking about whom he would see first when he returned. He ended up congratulating the protagonist, saying he managed to pass all those guards. That was Ray. He was already quite grown as he looked back. Then they were talking alone, and he said that the protagonist had grown a lot since the last time he saw him. The protagonist told the soldier that he hadn't changed at all in those 10 years and asked how old he was. But he said that was state secret, and that he heard his instructors mention that he was skipping classes to hunt magical beasts. He commented to the protagonist that it seemed like the day had been quite productive. The protagonist agreed, saying it had indeed been productive, and if they hadn't canceled the Amber Alert, skipping classes would have been much more difficult. He mentioned that either way, he preferred being in motion rather than sitting in a classroom. Meanwhile, the knight said it was good not to take too many risks, because if the patrolling guards saw him, things would get ugly. By the way, he had to say something. He stopped by his house before returning there. His father's condition remained stable, as his mother was taking care of him, and she wanted him to let the protagonist know that. He said all of this was to avoid worrying him. The protagonist felt a bit down and looked at him, saying he was grateful for the news, but soon started to feel sad again. He explained that he had continued training throughout the decade, rain or shine, in the cold or heat. He could barely unlock any new abilities, and that was making him very restless. Nothing had changed, and he had no idea what he could do. While the knight placed a hand on his shoulder and told him they were going back to the city, so he should hurry because the next day was the day he would go to Varian. He said he could hardly wait to see the other kids. They returned to the city of Drain at the entrance. where the guys were asking if he didn't know. He wanted to know how the soldier didn't know, while the soldier explained that the Amber Alert had been cancelled, so he had no reason to stop him. A guy with glasses asked how many times he would have to say that. That boy was special, and they needed to know where he was, while the knight arrived with the protagonist, calling out to Alan, asking how things had gone. Alan looked back and said Winford had arrived, but upon seeing the protagonist, he gave him a slap on the head, asking where he had been and calling him a fool. He said he always told him not to lose sight of him, and he had vanished, asking how many times that month it had been, since it had happened several times. The protagonist said it had been more than a month since the Amber Alert was cancelled, and he said Alan was being too harsh. While Alan grew more furious at the protagonist for responding back to him like that. The protagonist said that besides that, he was already leaving anyway, after returning to normal. But Alan disagreed, saying that as long as he was his student, he couldn't skip class, while the soldier tried to tell them to take it easy since they were very worked up. The scene cuts to the square of the city of Irony. Someone announced for the students to gather in the square immediately. An emergency meeting had been called. The protagonist was with Gary, saying this time it seemed the protagonist had been caught. The protagonist said he just had the worst luck while his head was still sore. The girl was nearby and a bit flushed, watching the two speak from behind. A guy picked up a certificate, saying he was the healer Lance, and the next morning, he would take all of them to the Avarian Knight Academy. The journey would take about a week, so if no one wanted to cause trouble, it was best to listen to his orders, asking if everyone understood, and of course, everyone responded affirmatively. One of the soldiers called Winford, asking if they had already decided on the route, while Winford said yes, and they would depart through the swamp. But the soldier didn't understand how they could go through the swamp. Wasn't it too early for those children to go into the swamp? But Winford said it wasn't early. They were already going to face challenges as knights, weren't they? Besides, they wouldn't be the only ones being tested, showing 3 more new students, all with red hair, in addition to the protagonist who was there confidently. The next day, they were at the gate of Rennie, which already had several carriages ready for departure, and the protagonist was already inside one of them. One of the boys asked why they weren't using teleportation, as it would be faster. Some people even agreed, but one of them said that if they teleported, it would be much easier, right? But another said they were all idiots. And the Avarian Academy didn't have any teleportation circles, while the red-haired one asked if Avarian wasn't at the same level as the Roland Magic Academy. So according to him, they did have one, and why wouldn't they? But then someone said they already knew who had been sleeping during class. It was that girl, and she said that the Avarian Academy was on the frontier, so they had to face foreign invaders, as well as shadow beasts, and if they placed a teleportation circle there, it would be the same as leaving the gates open for the invaders to destroy the entire academy. And the red-haired boy from the back asked if that had been covered in class, while another with his hand on his chin said that thinking about it, he thought the teacher had mentioned that. Meanwhile, the protagonist was lying on Gary's shoulder, while Gary wondered if it was his imagination or if she had looked in their direction. The scene cuts to the ruins of the castle, where someone warned everyone to pay attention since they would be setting up camp there. Gary called out to Ray, saying he thought Sylvia had her eyes on him, but then the protagonist wondered why on him. Why would that make her look at him? Then he asked if he was doubting. He just had to look back. The girl noticed they looked back and ended up turning around as well, getting all flustered while the person beside her was startled by her agitation. Gary asked if he had seen that and told the protagonist not to play dumb, while the protagonist said it wasn't because he was the redhead there, but Gary said he wasn't the only one there. There were the Slot brothers and Badge, along with another one who was Ian. He was a bit stronger than the others due to his physique, along with Kyle. He was the most cheerful one, asking who would set up the tent the fastest. The protagonist, while setting up the tent, said he had a point, but that wouldn't amount to anything, while Gary asked if he was sure, as she was definitely a cutie. Before he finished, he asked if he wasn't interested. The protagonist said no since he was a dragon and wouldn't even stand a chance with a human. After a while, there was a boy, and they were up to something. One of them asked Dan if it wasn't a problem for them to stray from the camp like that, while the other said that it smelled horrible, like the stench of a dead rat. They realized it was a long swamp, and it seemed to stretch all the way to the horizon. Someone appeared behind them and said yes, it was a swamp. The two ended up getting shocked with fear. The soldier continued saying that if they didn't want their legs eaten by swamp-devouring worms, because they were already exhausted from the trip, he thought it was best for them to hurry and set up their tents and go to sleep. Obviously, the two ended up running because they were scared. The scene moves to the camp. One of the soldiers was on watch while the protagonist was in the corner, beginning to think that if he patrolled during dinner and came by there, he could leave without worrying about the guards. But the girl simply appeared, grabbing the protagonist's arm, and told him not to go out at this hour because it was already late. The protagonist just said he was going to hunt magical beasts.